What's going on, Nerds of Color viewers? This is Lauren Lola coming to you. It's a new year, and with that, I have a new interview for y'all. I'm very excited to reveal this conversation I've had with Fonda Lee and Shannon Lee, no relation, about their upcoming new novel, Breath of the Dragon. It is a YA fantasy novel based on the characters and ideas of Bruce Lee. Just to give a general description of what it's about, it follows a teenage boy wanting to prove his worth in order to restore his father's honor. And in doing so, he realizes he's not just fighting for a better life, but also for the fate of the country. Loaded for a 16-year-old. Now, for those who don't know, Fonda Lee, one of the co-authors, is the author of the Green Bones Saga. She has also written other books, including Untethered Sky, Zero Boxer, EXO, and Crossfire. Her writing has led to her winning the World Fantasy Award, the Locus Award, and is a six-time winner of the Aurora Award, which, for those who don't know, is a sci-fi and fantasy award in Canada. She is also a finalist of the Hugo Award and the Nebula Award. Her co-author, Shannon Lee, is an actor, producer, author, and businesswoman. She is the CEO and owner of the Bruce Lee family companies and the chairperson of the Bruce Lee Foundation. And in case it wasn't already clear by now, Bruce Lee was her father. She is the executive producer of the martial arts drama series Warrior, and in 2020, she released her first book, Be Water, My Friend. I am so excited to share with you this incredible story put together by the collaborative creative minds of these two incredible women. And I hope you enjoy getting to hear how they made this happen. So here we go. Here is my conversation with Fonda and Shannon. Let's start from the beginning. What is the origin story of Breath of the Dragon?
Well, the origin story is that my father wrote a lot of creative projects for himself. He had treatments for various film and TV ideas, and that he wanted to embody and star in as a means for trying to create a vehicle for uh, representation, a vehicle for his own skill and talent and his passion for martial arts and for philosophy and those sorts of things. And so, as you know, back in the 60s and 70s, it was very difficult to get meaningful roles in Hollywood in particular. And he was shut out of that process a lot, and he would not take any roles that he found to be demeaning or belittling or stereotyped as much as he possibly could, which meant there weren't a lot of roles. So
Mm.
he had to create his own projects. So fast forward to now, many, many years later, and I'm the keeper of these documents. And they had a lot of similarity of theme and a lot of similarity of character, even though they were varied in their setting and expression. And it just started to come to me because most of these were incomplete projects. They were treatments mostly. There are one or two complete screenplays, and so I started to think that this could be a world in and of itself, that I could take some of these themes, these characters, these ideas, and put them into one cohesive world that could express a lot of what my father was trying to express in his own lifetime. And so I wrote up a treatment of my own that sort of, attempted to do this. And never having written a novel, I knew that it would be best to seek a collaborator and hopefully someone who could really get it, be excited by it, and want to work together on it. And I was so thrilled to be introduced to Fonda, and it was just like a perfect match, really. And the rest is history. I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, I'll say from my end of things, this was a project that was kind of exact like right time, right place, right subject matter. And I had started out writing young adult fiction when I debuted, and then I'd gone on and written adult fiction. And when Shannon reached out to me, it was like just sort of very perfectly in my wheelhouse. Huge impact that Bruce Lee had on me when I was growing up in terms of being a martial artist, an Asian American, a storyteller, all of those things just made it so that it was already just a logical fit in terms of the subject matter and the inspiration and what I like to do with my own work. And then Shannon and I just started brainstorming, and the story started coming together. And we were really lucky to find a publisher who was excited about it. And here we are launching the book.
Nice. Yeah, as soon as I heard that, like it was going to be, the two of you working together, I'm like, this couldn't be a more perfect match, just going off of what you two do individually already. So I guess what I want to direct it to Fonda now. I mean, as far as I know, it's not super often that, two people are writing one single novel. How was it for you to have a co-author for a novel for the first time? At least I'm aware of.
Yeah, no, definitely. I had not actually ever contemplated the idea. It seemed like something that would be hard, and hadn't really ever considered it. But once we got going, I think it just worked out really well in terms of process. I didn't find that it was at all constraining. I think that was because we had so much creative freedom, and I wasn't working within like an established world or within established canon. It was really just Shannon started off by sending me a bunch of documents for me to read from her father's files, and then getting a lot of inspiration from rewatching all the films. I was already really familiar with Bruce Lee, but went and did more reading, and then from there was sort of a real back and forth in terms of we would brainstorm and outline, and then I would go and write the first draft, send it to Shannon, get her eyes on it, get her feedback, and then we would iterate back and forth like this. So I think that honestly, the biggest challenge was just syncing up our schedules so that we were able to get to the manuscript in a timely way and work with our editor and so on. But I think that the project opened my eyes to the potential of collaboration because coming into this from the background of a novelist, I'm used to working in a very sort of solitary environment, and it was just different and refreshing.
Shannon, I wanted to direct it to you. This isn't your first book. You wrote Be Water, My Friend, that came out in 2020, but
Yeah.
this is your first novel. And so I'm curious, is writing a novel something you've always wanted to do?
It is actually, and I do have a fiction project of my own that I'm dancing with at the moment. Um, but I always loved creative writing. I had a school teacher in junior high school who it was a very unique class circumstance, and he had us keep a creative writing folder and write in it weekly. And I think that's really where my love of imagining and storytelling started. But then as time went on, I then took a creative writing course in college to see if that was something I wanted to pursue and had just like not a good experience. And
Hmm.
it was very academic and it was not for me. A lot of poetry also and very academically approached poetry. And I was like, ooh, maybe I'm not good at this. And so I sort of stepped back from writing for many years. And but always in the back of my mind, there was this like, but you really like to write. So I feel like fiction is, nonfiction in writing Be Water, My Friend. I'm writing really about things that I'm dealing with daily, that I know very well, that I've been working with for a number of years in terms of stewarding my father's legacy, in terms of my own personal self-work and those sorts of things. So, um, that felt like an easier tackle initially, but in the back of my mind, I was always like, and I have to say, publishing that book made me gain the confidence to say, well, maybe you could write fiction too.
Mm.
But I wasn't ready quite yet to try to take this on because I feel like my own fiction ideas, I can sort of like percolate with them in my off times and not put the pressure on myself to get it done, so that this book can be released and all of that. It's been an absolute privilege for me to get to sit on Fonda's shoulder and watch her process, see how her mind works, see how she structures, see how she moves and paces and all of those sorts of things. So hopefully that will all come in useful as I attempt to dip my toe into those waters down the line.
Yeah, totally. I think that's maybe like the the beauty that I see in this collaboration is that like we're having one person who's very experienced with writing fiction, another person who is very, I guess, compared to fun, like kind of new to it.
Totally.
And together you're both bringing your own specific ideas that I think are just going to make for something really special. I haven't read the book yet. This is just, going off the top of my mind. But yeah, I'm sorry you've had that experience with that college professor. It kind of sounds like a case of like someone going with a very specific agenda and it just wasn't a good match. But I'm
Yeah,
glad you found your way back to being part of the fiction world again.
thank you.
I don't know if you remember Shannon, but I did interview you for BWAR, my friend. Mind you, it was for a different outlet.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned at the time about how, going forward, you're hoping to share more of your own voice and time.
Mhm.
Although the ideas and characters in this book are based off of ideas of your father, would you argue that this is an extension of this goal of yours?
100%. Um, because whether it's, something having to do with my father or something having to do with my own, I am really dedicated to the craft of creativity in general. And this is an opportunity to exercise that in a way that I like even more beyond like for instance, I'm working on a biopic right now about my father, but that's very like this is what his life was. And yes, there's creativity in how we tell that story, but the story is known, right?
Mhm.
And this is something totally else. And I think it was a lot of fun for me to get to have that freedom to say, well, where could this go? What could we build? And when Fonda talks about, we didn't limit ourselves, we didn't restrict ourselves. We just really were like, what is the story that's begging to be told and how can we best serve that? That was an awesome process for me. And so, yes, this is definitely a step in the direction of exercising my voice more.
Nice. So Fonda, you already touched on this earlier that one of the challenges you two experienced was just syncing your schedules together. But I was wondering if you can elaborate more with, any other challenges.
I would say I mean, probably the biggest challenge was just time management because Shannon and I both have a bunch of things going on. I have my other books as well that are on contract. Shannon has got TV projects and a bazillion speaking events. And so I think, we've both over the last few years had a lot of things to juggle. So that's probably the most difficult part. I think other than that, trying to find like that right, I wouldn't say it was a challenge. Maybe it was a challenge, but in a good way. I think finding the right sort of level of accessibility and tone for a young adult audience for this project, because there's a bunch of ways we could have gone with this. It could have been a fully adult project. Most of Bruce Lee's films were adult films.
And most of your works too, I think, are
And
for an
yeah,
adult
and
audience
I'm
too.
certainly most well known for my adult work.
Mhm.
We had some people in the industry question if it could be younger, if it could be like a middle grade novel. So it could have gone in a bunch of different directions. But we both felt that young adult was the right place for it, in that it would have that. it would be that entry point for a generation that wasn't as familiar with Bruce Lee and his work, and also still be very accessible and crossover into adult fiction and his adult fans and readers who are already familiar with our work in the adult space. So finding kind of that right balance for the book where it's it's accessible, it's young adult pacing and action and relationships and genuinely authentic young adult characters, but there's also more to it that's appealing beyond sort of like just the core young adult readership. And so I think kind of nailing the right tone was maybe so something that we had to figure out.
Yeah.
Mm, I see. And Shannon, you want to have your spin on the question?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with Fonda 100%. I don't have really much to add to that because I feel like, whenever I work with someone collaboratively, which I do a lot because film and TV is exceedingly collaborative,
Yeah.
and I really try to not unless it's just like a line in the sand, I really try not to crush somebody else's creative voice or and in fact, have a tendency um to really want to just explore. Like let's explore. Let's try and find the best path forward. And collaborating can be challenging because you get an idea, you can be really excited about it, and then somebody else will be like, I don't know if that works, or
Mm,
I was thinking this instead, and I think that my work in film and TV helped prepare me a lot because there have been many times where I've been like, oh, but I was really seeing it this way. But then if you sort of allow the process to move forward and everything, it starts to shape itself. And a lot of times, great ideas that were never a part of it from the beginning start to come in and it just blossoms. And so, there's always that little bit of like that you have to kind of sit with yourself with a little bit and go like, is this a line in the sand or is this the possibility of something better?
The collaboration part I feel like was a very seamless part of the experience.
mm,
And like for example, and I really have to just credit Chen for being so open-minded to ideas and like always always being willing to talk about like go in depth on on every little thing and bad ideas around, and we just have these sessions where we're just spitballing everything that comes into our heads. And like that I think is really the fun part of collaboration is you're not banging your own head against the wall. At least there's another person's head to bang against. So
right.
there's you don't have to feel stuck. At least if you can always reach out to someone and have fresh eyes. And so that part is really it's really lovely. Like as an example, I think when Shannon first brought the idea to me. She'd envisioned it as a trilogy. And as we started talking about it, there were just so many thematic elements um, that were duality. So there was like the East
Mm,
West, the realm is split East and West. The main character, Jen has a twin brother. So there's these two scrolls. The scrolls are separate. So there's this duality lent itself so well to making it a duology, and I think it works really well that way. So there, and I never got the sense from Shannon that was like, no, like it has to be,
mm,
this is the way it's envisioned. It was a very like open dialogue, and so there are a lot of things that changed along the way. I mean, we have a main character, um, the twin brother Sai, who was an addition partway through the drafting of the first book and completely changed the nature of the storyline for the better. So there were a lot of, and there's things like this that happen with every creative project, right? It's the unexpected things along the way that sometimes have the most impact on what the final product is going to be.
oh,
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah. But I guess it also kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Fonda, that because this is an established universe that it really allowed you both to have a lot of freedom to play, really.
I've also written in comics briefly, and
Oh,
at one point I was writing Shang-Chi and
oh,
with
wow.
a co-writer. And so that was actually a sort of a little taste of a collaborative project in a completely different setting that I had.
Mhm.
And there, it was it was very different from writing a novel, for one thing, writing comics because of the fast turnaround. But because you're working with established characters and established canon, you're uh, my co-writer put it as dancing between the raindrops. There's so many things you can't do because you'd be like, oh, but I want the character to do this. And like, no, he can't. He's in this other series, and he can't do this. Well, that character died. There's just all these things where you're working within the constraints of an established universe and IP.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And getting to work on this novel together, what is one thing you learned from one another in the process of writing this book?
I mean, personally, I learned so much from Fonda just about uh, structure and pacing. I mean, that's kind of a logistic thing. Um, but it was really informative for me as a writer, and in particular, she's such a skillful fiction writer, and um, I really appreciated her take on why you would do this or do that, and how she illustrated the action so artfully and so in a way that served the story so beautifully, that was very much in line with, how my father approached action as well in his films. And um, I learned a lot about the art of writing, and that was a huge. I have a huge amount of gratitude for that process. And I mean, I think the other thing that just needs to be said is just that I think that because we had a lot of respect for one another, and um, because we uh, didn't take any, thoughts or things personally, and we were just really trying to serve the creative, it made the collaboration feel really easy. And I really appreciate that because not all collaborations are easy.
I believe that.
And so, yeah, I think that I've also just stood in awe of Fonda's depth of knowledge about literature and her genres and her and other authors and the industry and so many different things that I have got to learn along the way. It's been it's it's been a really wonderful experience.
Nice. And Fonda, what have you learned from working on this book with Shannon?
Mean, honestly, I feel like Shannon is sort of, I mean, she's the steward of not just her father's legacy, but so many of his lessons and philosophies. And one of the things that I did when we started working together was read Shannon's book.
Mm,
And Water My Friend really spoke to me as a creative person, because so much of it is really about um, the artistry of life and dealing with your challenges as a human being in a positive and flexible way. And there's so many things in a creative career that are unpredictable and that they're out of your control. And so much of Be Water, My Friend, is about accepting that and working with it and finding your strength and finding who you are and following that path of self-actualization that Bruce Lee really espoused, that he lived. So I feel like this collaboration taught me a lot about just the art of collaboration in general, because I've sort of also got to sort of peek over Shannon's shoulder a bit in terms of like how she collaborates, how she manages all these different creative projects that are going on, how she like works with me, but then also so got her show and her own work and all of and the foundation and all the stuff that's going on in a way that's like kind of um, multiplies the effect more than like one human being can reasonably do on their own. So that has been a big learning about just the art of collaboration, and then also how to live that philosophy, because it's not easy to do, right? You can read the words and you can be like, yes, that would be great, but then in day-to-day life it can be really hard to do. So actually, like Be Water, My Friend has a permanent place on my shelf, just because I feel like oftentimes you can open it up to a random place and be like, yep, I need to do more of that.
Thank you.
Nice. Breath of the Dragon is about to come out. And I'm curious, what are you hoping for it to add to the wide array of fantasy young adult novels already out there?
Hmm. Well, one thing I'll say is um, I started out writing young adult fiction that got a lot of support from librarians and teachers and their inf and bookstore staff, because it appealed to the reluctant teen boy reader. A lot of young adult fantasy fiction these days tends to be either skewed or marketed as kind of romance leaning, or for female readers. And I think that one of the things that young adult fiction still needs to do is also serve that like reluctant boy reader who wants something that's really high octane action, that's really propulsive, that has a lot of like that's really kind of gripping and unputdownable, but hopefully also is it has like smart messages and cool things that they can think about that's sort of layered in there. So that's one thing I've always had in my young adult books is it's just like I find that my books tend to kind of fill that niche. And I think that this one will as well. And then the other thing is exactly what we talked about earlier, was introducing a younger generation who may not be as familiar with Bruce Lee and what he stood for, and hopefully inspire them to like dig a little bit deeper and learn more.
Nice. Shannon, did you want to add on to that question?
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. Obviously the reason that I wanted to do this project in the first place was to continue my father's message out in the world and do it in the way that he liked to do it, which was through entertaining storytelling and dynamism, which I think this book captures really beautifully. I think I fully support both of the things that Fonda said, and I just hope that people who read this book are captivated by the energy of it in the way that they were when they would watch a Bruce Lee movie.
Ooh, nice. I like the sound of that. I have one more question for y'all, which is, what do you hope for readers to take away from Breath of the Dragon? Like any, I guess, like lessons or messages.
I think the book is a contemplation in duality. I mean, that might be something that's a little bit a few layers down, I guess, for readers, and may require them to read book two to fully get involved in. But I do think it is a contemplation in that, and that duality really serves to inform us about wholeness, whether that's wholeness of self or wholeness of community or wholeness of, the entirety of the oneness of all things. I also think it's a contemplation in one's own belief in self and self-worth and um, uniqueness and understanding yourself enough to be able to um, pull forth the best version of yourself, in particular under stress and pressure and when it's most needed, and not just do it for yourself, but do it for the benefit of all. So I would say that's a couple of the things, Fonda.
Yeah, I think about the journey of the main character, um, John, and what he goes through, and I think kind of the big um, arc that he experiences is around um, why does he fight and who does he fight for and what does it mean to be a warrior? And like he starts off very brash and kind of cocky, and he's really this prodigious martial artist. So, he can beat up lots of people. But then he gets drawn into this situation where there's a lot of other factors at play, and there's a much, much bigger plot, and a whole bunch of stuff happens to him. And he has to kind of wrestle with um, what he's fighting for is much bigger than himself. So I think that's something that's a message that we'd like to take away, is like being a warrior isn't just, being able to punch people really hard, but there's a lot more to uh, having the insight and the courage to fight for what you believe in and the people you care about, and to bring people together, and that conflict can martial arts and that can be a way to find peace and to bring people together rather than to divide, which I think is really something that's inherent in why martial arts has always appealed to me, why I've always loved studying it, is that it's actually um, it's about finding peace. It's about finding sort of inner tranquility through practicing violence, and like only by kind of practicing it do you kind of come to a place where you feel like you can oppose it, or you can you can do away with it, if you will. So yeah, I think that that's also another element of it. And then at the end of the day, I just want people to be super well entertained and be like, oh gosh, that was like watching a Bruce Lee movie, but on paper.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, like the reasoning for when, how, and or why anyone should fight is a message that I don't see explored enough, in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that's addressed in Breath of the Dragon.
Say I really echo what Fonda was saying, because I think for both of us as martial artists, um, we understand, and I have a lot of people ask me about this often. They're like, but isn't martial arts just about beating people up and violence? And I'm like, it's actually the opposite of that, And so I really appreciate that, um, and hope that this book can help to get that message across.
Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The hard knock life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.